Prep that bug spray because you're stopping up at the card pool. I'm your host, Stu Galetta.
And I'm Kyle Robertson.
And today we are looking at the hidden gems we have from Nemesis.
All right, well this is part one, of course, of our multi-part set review of Nemesis. You can also check out some of our previous episodes where we talk about some of the other sets that we've reviewed up until this point. But without further ado, let's kick off this review.
Let's do it, Kyle. And I'm starting with number 10. And this is going to be an artifact called Eye of Yog Moss. Now, this is a 3-drop artifact that has a 3 mana cost effect to tap. It reads, sacrifice a creature, reveal cards from the top of your library equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Put one of them into your hand and remove the rest from the game. So this is a very scary, high-risk, high-reward card. Now, most cards that we see in Magic that want to go ahead and sacrifice stuff, puts it into the grave or some form of drawing cards. And I mean, most initial comparisons will be to Greater Good. Greater Good's probably the better of this one, I will say. But if you're not running green and you need speed, this might be it. Especially if you're going to lose the game, you would want to lose something so you can find an answer and dig deep.
This actually reminds me more of something like Evolutionary Leap, which is kind of like the toned down Greater Good, where you would sacrifice a creature, search through your cards until you hit another creature and put it into your hand, that kind of thing. It's sort of like that, except obviously it can be played in any deck because it's an artifact. And also, the payoff is a lot bigger potentially because there is scaling here, obviously, and there's a lot more foreknowledge of what cards there are going to be. You get to pick pretty much any card from the top of your deck, not just a creature.
But you're not limited.
And you look at a whole spread. It's very, very interesting to me, although I will say that, like you said, Stu, the cards being exiled at the end of it, the ones you don't take, that feels really bad.
It does.
It feels really bad.
It really does. But some cards like being exiled, so them being out there. There's the Elemental...
Tauren Elemental.
Tauren Elemental, which loves being exiled because you just bring it back.
Right.
I mean, it's very limited in its scope, and that's not the main reason I like it. But Boros decks are the ones that love big, huge creatures, so they get bigger with the attack step. And they're super slow. Card draw, mana, everything. I think this would be a great home in Boros.
You actually just made me think of good old Brian Stoutarm Commander decks. I've seen people play those. It's not my favorite thing, but basically they have a lot of theft effects where you take other people's creatures and sacrifice them for your own stuff. Hey, here's another good candidate right here, and it's an artifact, so Boros sort of likes artifacts, plays into things a bit.
True, but even if you do steal it, you are exiling your own stuff. So again, I know it's a very risky card, not ideal, but it does help in certain realms. It is a budget card for those who need to try out deck strategies to see if they get the wheel turning, is this deck viable? And I think this is a great candidate to try to speed up decks that are slower.
I think you're absolutely right, Stu. And speaking of those Boros decks, let's go with a card next that could actually fit into them. Okay. So number 10 on my list is Spiritual Asylum. This is an enchantment that costs 4 mana, 2 colorless, and 2 white. Creatures and lands you control can't be the target of spells or abilities, so that means Shroud for all of you out there. When a creature you control attacks, you have to sacrifice Spiritual Asylum. This is very, very interesting to me. You don't really see a whole lot of this global Shroud in almost any color other than blue.
You really
White,
don't.
It's kind of strange, and also not just your creatures, but your lands, too. That's very interesting.
Well, it doesn't save you from, like, a Cataclysm, which doesn't target. But this is very unique. All right, white does care about attacking a lot. But when it doesn't, Super Friends.
Yeah.
You don't want to attack at all. You want to sit there and get value and accumulate value until you're ready to go for an alpha strike.
Right, and obviously this doesn't protect planeswalkers, but the few creatures you are going to play in a deck like that, you'd rather they not die. So
exactly. Or like a Mother of Runes. Mother of Runes, you always want to make it so it can live, even though it's providing an asset to other creatures.
Yeah, I think this is a great card for especially multiplayer games because this basically says, take me out of this fight. I don't want any part of this.
Yeah.
Nobody can hurt you. And it makes your opponents focus on maybe other players because it also guarantees that if you would lose the advantage if you take a shot at them.
Yep. And that is a big thing, actually. Most players won't swing out if they know that they're vulnerable to another attack. The people are going to be like, hey, man, you attack me? No. Jimmy has this on the board. Or Sally's got this. I don't want to be a target. I'm just going to say you guys kind of bash face, and we'll move forward on that. I'll meet you in the finals.
Yeah, and it does limit your options, it is true, but it does stop targeting of two of the most vulnerable card types out there, especially the lands. That's really nice to have some protection on your lands.
And this is an enchantment. Enchantments last compared to artifacts or creatures. So again, versatility is good with this card. Again, I don't think there's a big con. It just, you wouldn't use this in certain decks, but other ones you would. This is a great form of pretty much, I don't know, a ghostly prison kind of like style. You want to stay there and live as long as it can.
Yeah, I just built a Karametra Enchantress deck. I feel like this would be a really good inclusion in there. I gotta think about that.
Yeah, until you're ready to blow it up. Yeah, that works. But moving on from there to my number 9, I have another high-risk, high-reward card. It's called Murderous Betrayal. Now, it's a black enchantment that costs triple black, and it reads, for paying double black, pay half your life rounded up. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. Yeah, like I said, huge risk, huge reward on this card. And it pretty much has a built-in, what is that, terror?
Yeah, it is terror. Yep.
So this is a card that I like mainly because it tells players, I'm not going to use this unless I need to. And if I use this, it's because you guys are either going to try to kill me out of the game, which in fact, you'd rather lose half your life instead of losing the game, let's be honest, or somebody's going to combo off. We always mention Kiki Jiki being, once that hits the field, you have to kill it, or Macias, or, I mean, Triskelion, or any of these scary cards that we see in combos. So legit, having that out there just to make it so that you can then have it out to any scenario that's creature-based is good. It's always good. And people are always going to assess it. I'm not going to play this. They can just kill it right then and there.
Right, exactly. The cost here is really, really steep in life, especially at the beginning of the game. Not so much mana, really, because color commitment, you're probably not going to play this outside of a heavily based black deck anyway. But as the game goes on, and you maybe use this a couple of times, it actually doesn't get so bad. So you're maybe losing, maybe you lose 10 life, maybe you lose 5 life or something like that.
I mean, you're not really, if you have to use this when you have 40 life, it's going to sting.
Oh, yeah.
But also black, so black usually gets paired with white, life gain. But also there's a commander that recently came out in Dominaria. His name is Trollgan Famine Incarnate.
Torgar.
And
I built a deck with him, and it is very, very good, let me tell you.
Legit Torgar, yeah, I think we have an image. We'll pull it up for it real fast. He pretty much has the effect to set a player's life total to 10. So,
well, 20, because it's half of your starting life total. So, in Standard, it will be 10. In Commander, it will be 20.
So, but being able to do that to reset yourself is good, because you won't have to worry about sinking yourself down too far into the hole.
Right, and that's the whole point of why I like him as a commander, because sure, you can only hit other players probably once before it doesn't do anything, but you have all kinds of cards like this, like Necropotence and stuff like that, where you can pay oodles of life, and then you just set yourself to 20 again. It's great.
So I think it would be home in there for
I think you're absolutely
reasons.
Right. I need to get this.
No, I create a monster. But enough about this card. It's just something, again, I've never seen it played. It's pretty much, it's elegant in what it does, but I can see why players would be afraid of it.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But your number 9, Kyle, hit me with it.
All right, well, going with this high-risk, high-reward theme, I've got a green card at my number 9, another enchantment, though. It's called Overlaid Terrain, and this is another 4-drop enchantment, 2 colorless and 2 green. As Overlaid Terrain enters the battlefield, sacrifice all lands you control, and then lands you control have the ability to tap and add 2 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool. Yeah, that's right, you have to sacrifice all of your lands when this thing comes into play. That is, yeah, that's very real drawback.
That is not good.
Very real. But,
at all.
But think about it. This allows lands to tap for probably more mana than they already have, but it fixes their colors. Sure, the 2 mana have to be the same color, but they could tap for colors outside their actual color.
All right,
How interesting is that?
All right, mana fixing, that's totally great. And this can make a home in certain decks. I 100% agree with you. There's 2 commanders I can think of off the top of my head are Titania and the Yog Moss.
Yep, I played Titania at one point, and this was one way of just sacrificing all your lands and making a huge army of tokens.
Yeah, at that point, it should be kind of more or less plain, like, what's the Infect card? Cost 4, it makes it so all you guys have Infect and Trample and +1.
Oh yeah, Triumph of the Hordes. It's basically a win condition.
It would be a win con for landfall decks, which is really good.
Yeah, and the Gitrog monster loves that too.
Totally.
So.
It should be all the value you need. Now, outside of those decks, For fixing mana, that's very steep. You got Chromatic
No.
Lantern and all that other stuff.
No, I'm not advocating this see wide scale play. I think especially if you have a bunch of mana rocks early in the game and can get this out early when
That's
you
fair.
only have 2 or 3 lands, it won't sting as much and you can just kind of uphill generate value from there.
I didn't think of that. It'd be like a green Cataclysm.
Well, right, especially think about it. If you have like a Soul Ring and 2 basics, you can cast this on turn like 2 or 3. I mean, that would be excellent.
Or like you have like a Birds Out or like a Signet or
Right.
a Lotus Cobra.
It kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah, you could lessen it. But again, just playing it in the very beginning, they've only lost a little bit. I don't think they're playing the ramp spells at that point. I mean, you could inherently suffocate a player, let them get overrun by whatever creatures on the field.
Yes, but I don't advocate going to turn 4, playing a land per turn, and then playing this on turn 4 and wiping out all of your hard-won games. That's not the way to go.
Feels bad.
Yeah.
Totally feels bad. But moving on to my number 8, I'm going on to another black card. It is called Divining Witch. It costs 2 mana, 1 generic, and a black for a 1/1 Spell Shaper. And it reads, for 2 mana, 1 generic, and a black, discard a card from your hand, name a card. Remove the top 6 cards from your library from the game. Reveal cards from the top of your library until the revealed card is revealed. I read that wrong.
The named card is revealed, yeah.
And you put it into your hand. Remove all other cards this way from the game. So this is a really, again, high risk, high reward card, but some decks only focus on certain cards to win the game. Ad Nauseam is a great win con that people use that for, and the only thing is to search out for that card. This isn't out to that.
I have to say, this is very, very powerful tutoring. However, provided that you don't whiff, which in this case,
it's huge.
Sometimes it's bad. In this case, it's catastrophic.
Whoa, not yet.
If you exile the named card in those mandatory top 6 cards, you're gonna die. I'm sorry, but you're dead. You just lose. So I don't know. That's just really scary to me. However, you can turn this into a potential advantage because let's think about something like Laboratory Maniac. You could actually win the game by losing the game. So
yeah, exactly.
Maybe
it's very high risk, high reward, but we see this for competitive Magic, and I've never seen this card for competitive Magic, and it blows my mind for that. And again, also, some cards make it so you put stuff on the top of your deck, or you arrange the top of the deck. So we see cards like Sensei's Divining Top and Scroll Rack. Sometimes a junk hand's a junk hand, and you need to get rid of it. Let's out it out.
So you know how powerful a card Doomsday is. Doomsday, which is kind of the backbone of a lot of combo win strategies. This is Doomsday the creature. So
I didn't think of that one
have
either.
fun with that.
I'm actually learning from my own card here. This is actually pretty good in that realm. I like that. I was thinking more or less like Spider-Man, Superman, and Doomsday.
Oh, yeah, but yes, sort of.
Appreciate it. All right, well, going on to your number 8, Kyle. What do you got?
Well, I've got a blue card this time, and it's a creature called Wandering Eye. It's a illusion that costs 3 mana, 2 colorless, and 1 blue for a 1/3 body, also with flying. And it has a simple and short effect all players play with their hands revealed. Very interesting card here. Compare it to something like, let's say, Telepathy, for example. That's just a 1-mana enchantment that sits around and lets you see everybody's hands. Also a card like Zur's Weirding, which does other things as well, but still lets everybody see each other's hands. It's kind of an interesting ability because I don't necessarily advocate doing this all the time because it just causes a lot of problems. It slows the game down to a crawl because everybody sees what everybody has. However, it can be very powerful if you're trying to play control in a game, and that's great to have all that knowledge.
Well, I think of it as hand check prom night edition. Like, the chaperone comes by and is like, hand check, and that's literally what's happening. All right, what did you put in your hand? Oh, I got this, I got this. It makes it so that a lot of the surprises are gone. If somebody has a combo to win the game, it's revealed. Everyone knows not to waste stuff on anyone else except that player.
Right.
Which means you can then play cards that you wouldn't normally be able to. They would counter something like this.
Right.
But now knowing that this is there, they are forced to hold up the counterspell so that they don't lose.
It's absolutely true. So it can go both ways. The place that I really like this card and why I really wanted to bring it up in the first place was because like my very first commander deck that I ever built was old school Asperia the Inscrutable from the original Ravnica block, which was basically a tutor for flying creatures from your deck,
And your
provided
favorite set,
that you
too.
could guess the right card
Yeah.
from the target player's hand. So it's kind of chancy in that, but Wandering Eye, not only is it a flying creature, but also it deals with that problem. And I just thought that was just such a great combo to have.
It is. I think the enchantments are better because it doesn't get hit like a creature would in most
That's
scenarios.
true,
But
yeah.
it's another out. You'd want to have multiple effects like that in that scenario. And sometimes just knowing what's in people's hands is good on its own. You see Gitaxian Pro played.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more universal compared to that.
Yeah, not anymore though, because it got banned. So
In Commander?
Oh, well, pretty much everywhere. I think I'm not sure about Commander. I'd have to look that up. But
It's still in there.
pretty much everywhere else it was legal. But that's why the advantage of seeing someone else's hand is like an enormous
Well,
one.
that wasn't the reason. The reason was you pay 2 life, you draw a card.
Right, but
That was
still,
the strongest part about that card.
Still, seeing other people's hands is very, very good. Taking the surprise out of Magic changes the game a lot.
I mean, all right, let's say you have 2 of them in your starting hand. Would you not pay 4 life to draw 2 cards when you need it?
Yeah, probably.
And just target another player?
Right.
Yeah.
But the information you get is also really critical to the value of the card, I think.
Yes, for 1 mana, but we're not talking about Gitaxian Pro. So,
I think you're right. I think the non-creature versions are probably better, strictly speaking, but to know this card exists, maybe for you players that like those abilities, hey, there's one more card that does it.
Yep.
A creature, how about that?
Yep. And sometimes a creature is more relevant.
Yeah.
But moving on to my number 7, and yes, Kyle, I will use a blue card for you this time. It is an enchantment actually named Rising Waters, and actually that has to go and tie with the potential hurricane hitting on the East Coast. It is an enchantment that is 4 mana, 3 generic, and a blue. It reads, lands don't untap during their controller's untap step. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a land he or she controls. So this is a very strong control taxing strategy right there. And it is super relevant to a card that we see across the board in Magic, and it's called Winter's Orb. And Winter's Orb has the ability to make it so that only 1 permanent is untapped. So this
Yeah.
is a little bit less controlling compared to a Winter's Orb, but any deck that's running a Winter's Orb would run this.
Yeah, I hate cards like this. I really do. However, they can be very effective. I feel like just hitting lands like this is just a really cruel method of resource denial.
Oh.
Very unfriendly, but very effective. It's especially great against aggro decks, which tend to tap out every turn, and therefore it slows them down a lot.
True.
Not so much against control decks, who tend to leave their mana open, but I guess it would take them a while to recover if they end up tapping out for a counter spell or something like that.
Brago has the abilities to untap mana with like a Paragon Drake or a Paladin Crone and stuff like that. So you wouldn't get the minus. And also being able to blink your stuff in and out, you might not need to have mana to cast anything. So even if you're not worried about that timing, you could still have all the reward and no risk.
And also one of the most degenerate commanders in the entire game, Derevi. This card works amazingly with it because you can just untap all your own lands and everybody else's kind of out of luck. So
or if you
there
have
you go.
Seedborn moves, Seedborn will be able to undo that. Also,
That's
Bear
true.
Umbra and one of the swords, Feast and Famine.
Yes, yeah.
So like you have ways that this won't hurt you at all. But I've never seen this card. It's under $1. And what is it? Winter Orb is not.
Yeah, no,
So-
I've seen this card before, like I said, Derevi, but not often. Not often.
But that's just a tech. You could put this in so many other decks that just like splash blue. Huge.
Yeah, agreed. Well, another card I think that maybe has a little bit more narrow use, but still can be pretty darn good. I'm going to go to my number 7, and once again, we're going into red here, and it's called Shrieking Mog. Now, this is a 1/1 goblin that costs 2, 1 colorless, 1 red, and it has haste. When Shrieking Mog comes into play, tap all other creatures. So you kind of have to think about this one for a little bit, because when you just look at it at first, it's like, okay, this comes into play, all other creatures are tapped, and then I swing with a 1/1 and do 1 damage. Hooray. Doesn't really seem all that great, right?
No.
But if you think about how this can potentially combo with other decks, this was one of my favorite cards to play in my old school Alesha Who Smiles at Death deck.
You can
because
tap down
you
stuff.
have to exactly well, and you have to trigger things so that this matters, because Alesha attacks. brings the you declare all of your attackers. They're all already attacking. You bring this card back from the graveyard or something like that, and all your opponent's creatures then become tapped. You get to swing through with whatever you had that was already attacking. Even if they're tapped, it doesn't matter.
And also, other opponents are now vulnerable. So, like, as the turn order goes, they can potentially direct Alpha Strike on other people.
Right,
so
right.
That is niche. I like it. That's, see, honestly, I was like, what you said initially. And actually, I read it wrong. I thought it said Shrieking Mog, and I was like, donkey. So, illiteracy right there. But yeah, in that realm, it's decent, and it is a goblin, so it does work in those kind of strategies. I was thinking more along the lines of like sneak attacking it in.
Or just Vidalcan Orrery, which gives everything flash. If you flash this in, it's basically a fog in red. Okay.
Pseudo fog, combat damage fog, if you go ahead and you time it right. So, yeah, interesting. Not sure it works everywhere, but like you said, it has its
definitely.
place.
There are very specific places that this card is good, but I just think it's such a cool piece of tech and such an integral role player in those places.
There's actually one, I use it in my Horde of Notions. There's a green elemental it has Echo on its effect, and it's the same thing when it enters.
Oh yeah, Timbermare.
Timbermare. It's a little bit more of a beefier version of this, but it's essentially the same kind of idea.
It is, exactly, yeah, except this is goblins, that's an elemental, different tribes, but that usually actually doesn't matter.
Yeah, really, but it's interesting in that regard. Very similar to that. And I love Timbermare. Now, from your red card to mine, this one's totally usable in every red deck.
Okay.
So I'm talking about a card called Laccolith Rig. It is a 1-drop red aura. Yes, an aura. And I know you're not a fan of these, Kyle,
I hate auras.
So let me get your ear for a second before we dig in. It reads, whenever enchanted creature becomes blocked, you may have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature. If you do, enchanted creature deals no combat damage this turn. Okay, so let me paint the picture for you, right? Blightsteel's on the field. We'll go something crazy like that, right? So some opponent has a Blightsteel, you play this on it, right? So now if it goes to attack and is blocked, you choose where the infect damage is now dealt. So it can either go right back on the Blightsteel, or it can go on to another creature and then give enough damage to give them lethal in infect to knock a player out. Also, one thing that red likes to do is it makes it so that players can all have to go out and attack, or reverse, all have to block one creature. So if each creature is having to block this creature that's coming, we'll say a Blightsteel, it gives out damage continually over and over again. It stacks.
That's very interesting. I never once considered putting this on somebody else's creature.
Why would you put this on your own?
You get to choose. Wow.
Yeah, you now made it so that their threat is your threat, but people are going to kill that creature which you don't control to now have that kind of possession of the board.
Wow.
1-drop red, I've said it before and I'll say it again, red has the strongest enchantments in the game. We need an Enchantress red deck. Boros would be the best home for it.
Hey, I'd even sign up for that. Yeah, you've heard me before. Auras are almost guaranteed 2-for-1s. I don't like them, so it really takes something game-breaking for me to consider playing them.
And this is it.
Well, originally when I was thinking about it, I was like, even for 1 mana, there's no way that this makes the cut. Although, the Laccolith ability is sort of interesting because it basically guarantees that if there's a creature over there you really want eliminated, even if they block with something else, you'll still get to eliminate it. I mean, that's pretty decent, but just why would you do that when you could just, I don't know, lightning bolt it or something, you know? But
I agree.
in any case, that...
Or Chaos Warp it, for example.
But putting that on someone else's creature, I never thought of that. That is really brilliant.
And that's the one thing a lot of people forget, especially newer players in Magic, forget that auras can go on other people's stuff.
Right.
I know I made that mistake doing a couple of drafts. Like, I had Guild in my hand, and I'm playing a guy who had this horrible creature. I didn't know how to get rid of it. And Kyle's over my shoulder and be like, he's got this, he's got this. I'm thinking, why would I want to exile my own card to get a gold token? And I luckily won without using it, but you were, like, having a seizure behind me, freaking out about that. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about hitting an opponent. That's the same kind of thing with Laccolith Rig.
Wow.
It's so strong. Again, and if people take it out, you wasted 1 mana for them to get rid of it. But you can also force attacks so that you get the benefit off of this. Right. And again, if they block with more than 1 creature to prevent the damage, you get to give it out 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, whatever the
You
amount
could
is.
even throw it right back at themselves.
Exactly, and kill them. And again, like I said, with something like an Eldrazi, like if you had something that has, when it attacks, like the Ulamog, where it, like, Annihilator,
yeah.
they will choose the Annihilator effect, sure, but you still choose where the damage is out, so you could remove a threat that they would want on their own field, or an ally of theirs. So this is a card that should have been in Battle Bond or Two-Headed Giant, because it plays so politically.
That's really funny. I never even thought of that. Wow.
I saw this, I bought a copy right away. It's under 50 cents, and it's Chaos Magic with control.
Yeah. All right. Okay. You sold me on that one. All right. That's
I made
a good
you
aura.
your words.
That's
I'll
a good
take
aura.
it.
Well, going to our final card for today, my number 6 is going back to my favorite color, blue, Rootwater Thief. Now, this is a merfolk, putting it in a pretty good tribe here, for 2 mana, 1 colorless and 1 blue, with a 1/2 body. You could tap a single blue to give Rootwater Thief flying until the end of the turn, or whenever it does combat damage to a player, you may pay 2 colorless mana, and if you do, you may search that player's deck for any card and exile it, and then they shuffle their deck. I think this is, for a number of reasons, a fantastic addition to the Merfolk arsenal, because not only is it a cheap, possibly evasive creature, which is great, and you can even play this outside of Merfolk, I guess. Like, I actually like playing this in Tetsuko Omizawa, because this can just get through unblocked no matter what. You don't even have to.
I don't even know what that card is.
It's the legend, right? The legendary from Dominaria that basically gives all your creatures with either Power 1 or Toughness 1 unblockable.
Oh,
this is a great inclusion.
Yeah, that's perfect with that.
And yeah, I think this is just great because you can go into somebody's deck and take some of their, like, a key combo piece, something really, really just obviously strong out of the equation for good.
It sounds like the one, you played this commander, Thada Adel.
Yes, Thada Adel. I love that card.
It sounds like Thada Adel as a 99, where it's not as limited in the scope of being artifacts.
Right, you have to pay a little more for it, but still, it's
anything,
it does pretty much the same thing.
Like, there's a lot of decks where it's like they need something that's in there. Who's Scion, the Ur-Dragon. Where it's always tutoring dragons out. You would need to remove certain ones so they just don't flat out win the game.
Exactly. That's 100% correct.
So this is a great card, totally against it. It's Merfolk, works in Tribal, works on its own. Easy to make unblockable, especially in blue.
You want to hear a fun piece of trivia about this card, too?
Answer 7.
No, it was actually, this was one of those cards, like Crucible of Worlds is too, that was like designed by a world champion winner or something like that, because when they win, they get to design their own card. And he's actually the guy who's depicted in the art about to get like eaten by the merfolk, or I don't know. But anyway, this card is kind of, when you look at this card's effect, the guy who designed the card was eventually kind of a subject of controversy because he allegedly cheated at tournaments. So just think about the irony of this card design.
That's good flavor. That's flavor without a flavor text right there. Well, and it's also flavorful because it's not, like, most of those cards are very expensive. Like, you see Snapcaster Mage, that's one right there that they had to, like, refine over and over and over again.
Yeah, and Crucible, before it was reprinted.
All those are super expensive cards. The fact that I didn't know this was one of them.
Yeah.
And it's
an old one, but it is one of them.
It's an old one under $1. That's kind of another slap in the face on that face.
Again, I don't think this belongs everywhere, but certain decks can really take advantage of this, and I would advise it.
I think, well, all right, Tribal, yes. Blue Steel,
Tetsuko, or
Zedru.
Thada Adel.
Zedru, who goes ahead and steals permanents and stuff like that. You can go ahead and give him this, where it is useless at a point. It's also a good chump blocker, early come out. I'm for a blue card that's Merfolk, I don't hate it, and that's a big thing coming from you to me. So yeah. Where are we? That's number 6. So that's going to conclude part 1. If you are excited for part 2, it's coming up soon, in which we go ahead and we're going to dive into the second part of our hidden gems for Nemesis, coming out for you next week.
Indeed. So regretfully, that is our pool time for today. You can let us know what you thought about some of the cards we talked about today, either in the comments down below, or you can reach out to us in social media at our Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook pages, all at the handle MTG The Card Pool. And of course, as Stu said, stay tuned for next week, where we'll look at part 2 of our hidden gems from Nemesis.
And until then, I'm Stu Galetta.
And I'm Kyle Robertson.
And we'll see you next time at the Card Pool.